Hello, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Yeah. It's good to see that you're coming back. I know that we kind of talked about a lot of things and it might be stressful when you start therapy to kind of um dig up a lot of your feelings. So I guess I kind
hmm
of wanted to check in with you about that and how you're feeling.
I've been doing like a lot of reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, you know, one thing you mentioned is like creating healthy, healthier boundaries with my
Mm-hmm.
mom. And I think that that would probably be a good idea because my mom is a really, really great support,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also be really stressful too.
Yeah.
So I think like finding that balance of
Mm-hmm.
what what I should allow
Right.
is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. So it sounds like the main themes that have kind of come up as we've talked is you know y- you're dealing with a lot of conflict there with your mom, and maybe sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, it's a bit of a roller coaster.
hmm
And on top of that, you have so much going on and you're so busy and you have a lot of responsibilities and you're dealing with a lot of stress, and a lot of
hmm
anxiety is something we talked about, right?
hmm
And I had, after our last session, we didn't get to do it in session, but I had sent you the anxiety screening, which
hmm
had kind of shown that you do have a lot of symptoms of like a generalized anxiety disorder. So
hmm
some of those symptoms, whether it be from different triggers, maybe with your mom, maybe with work, maybe with other responsibilities, are kind of creating a pattern where you are feeling like you need to use marijuana more often, and that's not really the direction you want to take to cope with stress. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a really good summary. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, something that we can look at today, right? Over time, I think that we could certainly explore boundaries with everybody in your life, with your mom, with work, with whatever other stuff goes on with raising a child, right? I'm sure there's activities and these things, and you got to kind of like organize everything. But
Yeah.
at this point, it might be easier for us to start out with giving you some coping skills to kind of get yourself to a baseline
hmm
that's a little bit calmer before we try to dive into like the interpersonal skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
So I thought that, and I can share with you also information about creating healthy boundaries and what things we can put up with and what we can't. Um, but perhaps, it seems like all of these things kind of tie into stress and anxiety. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. Yes.
Do you feel like it could be helpful to look at developing some coping skills for your anxiety?
Yes. Yeah. Other than smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that maybe today we can try like a little activity, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with the concept of CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy?
Um, no.
So
Could you
basically
ex-
it's in a nutshell, right? It's kind of just like a lot of therapists will use this to kind of help you look at, say, your cognition, right? Like your thought, your feelings, and your behavior, and how those kind of loop in together.
Okay.
Like you might have, for example, right? You say that often you'll use marijuana to deal with stress, right? So we could
Mm-hmm.
even use maybe a recent time where you felt, oh, I might need to smoke marijuana to deal with my stress and kind of break that down. And then
Mm-hmm.
after we break down your thought, your feeling, and then the behavior would be smoking, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can look at alternatives to that. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, how about we think of it like this? We'll look at the situation first, right? What was a recent situation where you felt so much stress, anxiety that you decided it would be best to use marijuana to cope with that?
Um, this week I had to pick my son up from school early because
Mhm.
he was having some behaviors.
Mm.
And like as soon as I got home, I was like, it had been a really bad week and I just was overwhelmed
Mhm.
with work and then that on top of it all. So I just like got home and I instantly like smoked
Yeah.
just to calm down.
It sounds like you had a lot of things building up and it got to the point where you finally had a moment to yourself,
Hmm.
and that was the best thing that you could think of to kind of get yourself back to, like we kind of said, like a baseline of a little bit more calmer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's look at, so the situation would be that, you had to kind of change your plans and pick up your son early from school because he was getting into trouble,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
what kind of thoughts went through your head during that time?
Oh my gosh, like what's going on with him? He's been having all these problems in school lately. I'm gonna get fired at my job.
Mm.
Uh, the school's gonna suspend him and then I won't have anyone to watch him and then I'm definitely losing my job.
Right.
Like just a lot of, I guess, a lot of
Mhm.
things that might not even really happen.
Right. So it sounds like there's a lot of worst case scenarios that went through your head.
Yeah. I was calling my boss and I couldn't get a hold of her and
Yeah.
it was just chaos.
Yeah. And one of the words that a lot of therapists will use to describe that type of thinking is like catastrophizing.
Hmm.
So you're thinking like it's a catastrophe, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Am I going to get fired? What did he do? What's going to happen with
Hmm.
him?
Yeah.
And it's a bit of like a cognitive distortion, meaning that like it's not necessarily actually what's happening, but your mind is putting it into this very, very,
Reality or something
yeah,
like,
very anxious reality.
yeah,
And I'm using the word anxious, but what would you say is the feeling that you're experiencing there? Could be more than one.
panic. Yeah,
Yeah.
panic
Okay.
for sure.
And then that would lead to usually the behavior of smoking can kind of
Yeah.
reduce some of that panic, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But as we've been talking, I've kind of have wrote that down, and I can share, if you would like to do this kind of on your own, I can share like worksheets with you where you can fill out the different steps.
Hmm.
So we have the situation, right? That was your son had gotten in trouble at school and you had to leave work to pick him up. So your thoughts have a lot of worst case scenarios like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's wrong? Am I going to get fired? And that's a lot of feelings of anxiety. So those are your thoughts and feelings, and they lead
Yeah.
to the behavior, which would be something that you said you kind of wanted to change, right? Was smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
So we can kind of go back through each one of those and come up with an alternate solution or an alternate thought. So instead
Okay.
of thinking, oh my God, am I going to get fired? Or what's wrong? Is he going to be okay? What else could you kind of think in that moment that might be less anxiety provoking for you?
Probably asking questions because like
Hmm.
the school called me and I was just like in such a panic that I didn't even really like
Right,
ask like, was he hurt or was this
right.
like something that happened with a classmate or like anything? Like I didn't slow down at all. I
Hmm.
just was like, wow, like I have to get that right now. And like I didn't like I was trying to call my boss and I'm like, oh my God, she's just gonna fire me. But like, she has kids too, and like
Right,
she probably had something like this happen to her at least once in in
right.
her career, like she's got 3 kids. But like I
Yeah,
just didn't like even just slow down, like just slow down and think.
right. It sounds like maybe a lot of what you're saying is that you could have benefited from kind of reminding yourself of what you can do in that moment. You can ask the
Yeah.
question, your
Yeah.
boss might understand,
Hmm.
and you'll figure it out when you get there, right?
Yeah. Instead of like, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, they're calling me because he like punched some kid in the face, or some kid punched him in the face,
Yeah,
or he like tackled a kid, or he, yelled at someone, or he fell and broke his arm. Like, there's so
yeah.
many different situations. And like, I instantly go to, maybe it was just like a weird moment for him,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
he freaked out and then he calmed down. But instead, I'm like, oh my God, he punched someone in the face. He broke his arm. He did, the worst thing possible.
yeah. But you did what you could, right? Maybe that's something that could be helpful to tell yourself is I'm figuring it out. I'm doing what I
Yeah.
can.
Well, and when you sent me the anxiety screening, like a lot of the questions really got me thinking, like, why, why did I go right to there?
Yeah,
Like, why did I just go from 0 to 60
yeah,
in like 2 seconds when I could have just slowed down?
right. Do you have like any physical signs that you're going into sort of a panicked state?
Yeah, I'll start like sweating, and
Hmm.
then my heart will like go, like it'll be beating, but then it'll be like like really fast.
Right.
And I'll be like kind of fidgety and stuff.
Okay.
I
So
stutter if it gets
it's
really,
good.
really bad.
It's good that you're aware of that, right? And maybe
Yeah.
that could be a sign when you say, "Oh, I'm starting to sweat, I'm starting to stutter," or whatever it may be. Maybe I should tell myself like a mantra or something, that is the opposite of what I normally tell myself.
Hmm.
Like instead of the worst case scenario, telling yourself, I'll figure it out. It's when I get there, right? And
Yeah.
then, yeah, does that
So
make sense?
take a deep breath, just
Yeah, yeah,
and not go right to that thought. Like I don't have
right.
to go there,
Yeah.
I
And it's
think you
not
bring up a
easy.
good
It's
no, but
extremely difficult to do, for sure.
you you bring up a really good point though, because I don't have to do that. Like I don't have to be
Hmm.
like the worst things happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. And then that brings us to kind of like what other coping skills could you do when you do get home? Something that a lot of therapists will recommend is like a mindfulness, and that's kind of like what we just talked about, right? Being mindful of your senses and your body, right? So I
Hmm.
could, send you certain activities, but one could be like you would get in touch with your senses, right? We have five senses, so you would kind of count down from five, four, three, two, one, with things you can see, things you can hear, smell, taste, touch. And it kind of forces you not to get caught up in that spiral of, you know, the worst case scenario.
It makes you seems like it makes you slow down and like kind
Yeah.
of think about where you're at right now instead of
Yeah,
spiraling out of control.
right. It's kind of like grounding and it gets you in touch with the moment. And it can also
Hmm.
help you get in touch with your own emotions. Like the things we've talked about is seeing how those emotions develop and how they go
Hmm.
from 0 to 10 and where to
Yeah.
intervene so it doesn't get to that point, right?
Okay. That makes sense.
So maybe you know, in between now and the next time that we talk, right? We'll have another session in a week or so. You could try out, I'll send you some mindfulness exercises. Maybe you could try some of those, or you could even come up with a list of other things that are calming to you or your own coping skills, because everybody has a different preference. And we could talk
Okay.
about that next time.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan.
All right. Well, I guess that, do you have any other questions or anything else you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think you gave me a lot to kind of work on this next week, and I do
Hmm.
want to give that a try.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, and I think that, you did a lot of hard work. It's not easy. And we'll plan to talk again next week, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.